Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Tier List Rankings. I was about to say, did you know Doctor Who? But in this tier list ranking, we're going to be talking about Robot Wars, because I'm a huge fan of Robot Wars. I've seen it being filmed twice, in 2002 and 2003. That's Series 6 and Series 7, respectively. And obviously, I work on the Robot Wars wiki and all that stuff. I've also done plenty of videos regarding Robot Wars, whether it's seeing some of the live events involving roaming robots or extreme robots as it's now known, and all sorts of other stuff back on the old Diator channel, and obviously Robot Arena stuff. But this is a different type of Robot Wars video. This time it's actually about a ranking of the house robots, or in this particular case, ranking of the house robots and their variation in design. Because the house robots did go through different designs over the years. I don't just want to talk about one specific design and talk about it that way, because there are some designs which work better than others when it comes to the house robots. In fact, I'm going to just go through some of the rankings. So, of course, S and A tier are normal, so it's D and F tier. F is the worst. D is not that great, but not terrible either. A is great, but missing a few little bits and bobs. And S is the best of the best. But there are two different extra boxes. And these extra boxes in the middle is the great design, but ineffective. And effective, but poor design. So what I mean by that is it can look great, but it might not be very effective, might not do much. And what I mean by the other one, it's effective, but it looks absolutely awful. It looked terrible. It basically might as well just be a bunch of scrap on wheels. So, nonetheless, I hope you enjoy this video as we get right away with the ranking. And starting off the list is Cassius Chrome. And Cassius Chrome is infamous among the Robot Wars community for being the most despised, most hated robot ever. I don't think there's a single person that really likes it other than the people who want to be contrarian and say that they like the robot that barely moved 2 inches and got destroyed in a second. Those sort of people. But Cassius Chrome, and this is going to sound very controversial, Cassius Chrome, I actually really like the design of Cassius Chrome. Cassius Chrome looks great. And that's the thing. Cassius Chrome does look great. I love the fact that they incorporate the boxing fists as a part of the weapon, and the design looks very cartoon exaggerated. It looks very good. Something that is very awesome about the later house robots, that being Mr. Psycho, Growler, and Cassius Chrome, is that they have a lot of personality, a lot of characteristic to them, and Cassius Chrome really shines in that department. But the reason why Cassius Chrome is so hated, and the reason why he's only going to be in the great design but ineffective tier, which I'm just going to put right there, is the fact that Cassius Chrome was useless. Cassius Chrome is, I believe, designed by the Killer Carrot team. And you can kind of tell this is a robot created by a competitor team, because, the competitors don't want their robots trashed by the house robots. So they're going to create the worst possible house robot possible that can not do any damage to them. And whilst it does look great for creativity, in terms of effectiveness, it was useless. The most I can say about Cassius Chrome, which is positive in terms of effectiveness, is his speed. He was very speedy, he was very fast across the arena, he could ram into robots. So that's some points there. But he was basically just a competitor robot that was designed to be a house robot. And, it's quite telling when even the show doesn't give a shit about Cassius Chrome. Series 7, the presentation of Series 7 is all over the place in general. It wasn't really presented well, which I do believe kind of helped getting it cancelled in 2003 or 4, I believe it was. And one of the prime examples of how poor the presentation in Series 7 was is just the fact that Cassius Chrome was just sort of dumped onto the screen and says, oh yeah, here's the new house robot, guys. There you go. And yeah, it wasn't the best introduction, let's be honest. And not compared to the previous series where they had all these explosive season, openers with the house robots and all that. They just dumped him on the screen because they needed to keep telling the audience that they're going to have a prize money of £20,000. They had to keep telling the audience about the prize money. That was more important than a house robot introduction. But nonetheless, Cassius Chrome, it looks great. I will say this, the design is fantastic. I actually really do like the design. It's creative, it's fun. It actually incorporates the weaponry quite effectively. But but it was useless. It's basically a competitor robot that they've decided is a house robot. It's small, useless, easy to bully around, and it only had one season appearance, and for very good reason. Even if they did decide to bring all the house robots back for the reboot, I doubt they would have brought Cassius Chrome back. Just saying. So next up is the Series 1 and 2 Dead Metal. Series 1 and 2 Dead Metal is an interesting design because obviously, you know, Dead Metal compared to the other house robots sort of went through the most radical change. So initially in Series 1 and 2, he had like a scorpion tail design. And it's that sort of design that you see in BattleBots with robots like Scorpio or Sawblaze, you know, those sort of robots. Or what was that one? The one I really liked from the older series, SOB, I think it was. You know, designs which I'm very surprised Robot Wars competitors never incorporated themselves. Like, they will fail to qualify robots like Tanto and Nebula, I believe it, or Neutron, I meant, which sort of looked like that, but I think the only one that I can think of is Vulture, and that wasn't very useful. Yeah, it's a shame there was no real competitor that used that like overhead saw blade design, because I think that's quite a cool design. We've seen in BattleBots that it can be quite effective. But with Dead Metal, the issues with Dead Metal is quite simple. He's basically, he looks great. I will say that. He looks fantastic. He looks animalistic. He looks rusty. He looks all crooked and grungy looking. But, and this is a big but, and the reason why they changed it for Series 3 was the fact that he was kind of ineffective. And what I mean by that, for one thing, his arm was too long. So there'd be times where his arm would like come overhead and he's about to saw a robot, but then it'd like hit the top of the robot and it wouldn't even make contact with it. There's also the fact that in Series 1 in particular, the saw blade just shattered completely. In fact, at one point, it almost killed Jeremy Clarkson behind the scenes. And because, it was so ineffective and the saw blade wasn't that great, and the arm was too long and it kept hitting the top of the robot as opposed to sawing into the robot, its effectiveness wasn't very good. However, it made up for that with the claws. And this is the thing, the claws actually were useful and is good at grabbing robots and taking them about, but the actual saw wasn't very useful. So I think the design is great, and whilst the saw wasn't that useful, I will give it points for the claws in particular, and I actually think it deserves an A ranking. I really like this design. It's a shame that Robot Wars in general, or the competitors, haven't incorporated that sort of design. In BattleBots, they've done it loads of times, but why haven't the UK done it? They really should, because it's quite a cool design, the overhead saw, sort of look and design. But obviously, because the Series 1 and 2 design wasn't really working out, Dead Metal got a massive overhaul. And here is the classic Series 3 to 7 Dead Metal look, which, let's be honest now, the Series 3 to Series 7 Dead Metal look is an instant classic. It improved from where it was previously and just made it look so much better. It's got a lot more personality this time. Dead Metal doesn't just look like an emotionless robot. He actually has a lot more personality. He's got these eyes on him, the way he lunges forward and just slices into the robots. It creates sparks and creates crevasses in them. It's fantastic. You cannot deny how beautiful Series 3 to 7's Dead Metal really was. It was, it really is the most iconic of all the designs in terms of Dead Metal. There's not really much to say. I really like that they sort of kept the back design, obviously. The meshy metal look on the back and the spikes protruding all over the place gives it this animalistic look. It's very scrappy. It doesn't look clean. That's the whole point of it. And just the way of how he can now just grab onto any opponent and just saw into them. Once you're caught by Dead Metal, you are trapped. There's no ifs, no buts. You're trapped. And what makes it even better is just the, sheer violence and power of this thing. Dead Metal is just gorgeous. He's sort of that ugly gorgeous, if that makes sense, because he's got, like I said, he's a very scrappy looking robot, but, that's the whole point of his design, made out of scraps, basically. And in terms of effectiveness, extremely effective. I believe he only got flipped once in the entire series, and that was by gravity in Series 7. And yeah, Dead Metal rocks. Like, Dead Metal is just too good. Too good. So along to the reboot now, the first of our reboot designs. Now, the reboot, I'm going to say this right now, has 2 robots which look fantastic and 2 robots which look awful. Luckily, Dead Metal is in the look fantastic section. It has a gorgeous design, more or less the same as the old one. The only downside is they kind of got rid of the scrappiness of this Dead Metal. Like, whereas Series 3 to 7's Dead Metal had he's webbings in between the armor every so often, but it wasn't all over the place. This one is just straightforward, just spiky and got gaps all over the place. But nonetheless, Dead Metal still looks like Dead Metal. The claws, less spiky again, Those little changes are a little bit annoying, and I've never really understood why they gave Dead Metal a black, sort of head this time, but hey-ho. Nonetheless, Dead Metal basically looks the same and looks great. However, and this is a big however, let's talk about how useless Dead Metal was in the reboot. Dead Metal in the reboot was barely used, and for very good reason, because Dead Metal did jack shit. It was basically there on the occasion. It got flipped. It might have caused a few sparks in Series 8. Then in Series 9, it got damaged by Aftershock. And then in Series 10, it didn't really do anything. I think it only appeared twice. If I can think about it, I can only remember him in 2 battles, and that was both in the World Series. One where he got flipped, and the other way he saw into Big Nipper. But at which, doesn't say a lot of good things about Dead Metal. And I think really this is sort of a tragedy of, how things have updated these days, because Dead Metal went from being quite a fearsome robot that you don't want to get captured by to a robot that you could literally Foxic of all robots, a robot that could barely function, was able to push Dead Metal from one corner to the other corner. You gotta ask yourself, if you can get defeated by a robot that was basically immobilized in the first round, you're gonna have to ask how effective it was. And honestly, that's really the problem with Reboot Dead Metal. It was so ineffective and so useless that, you started to realize that the Dead Metal was starting to have less and less appearances. By Series 10, you're lucky if you even saw him in an episode. That's how useless he became. And it's a shame, because the design is great. The design is still, wonderful. And when he did call Sparks, he called Sparks. But then, at the same time, I believe he got immobilized by Gabriel at one point. Gabriel smashed down and immobilized him. Now, the amount of times Stinger smashed into Dead Metal in the old series, nothing happened. There's something wrong there, with Dead Metal. And obviously, like I said, there are the few issues with the design. I'm not really a fan of the whole clean look for Dead Metal. I prefer it to be a bit more scrappy, a bit more rough. Sadly, I'm going to have to put Dead Metal in the great design, but extremely ineffective. I'm going to put you above Cassius Chrome, for sure. But, yeah, that's unfortunate. Now on to Growler. Growler is such a wonderful looking house robot. I love the idea of this big mechanical dog, zooming across the arena, grabbing robots with the jaws and just smashing them to pieces. The Ellie's little pink bot battle with Typhoon. The battle itself is terrible if you think about it. Ellie's little pink bot, I believe it's called, was just in the arena, just immobile from the start. It was a dead robot standing, basically. And Typhoon just hit it once and started away. And then Growler just came and just made the battle brilliant, just by obliterating this thing. It's funny because Growler actually has 2 weapons. He obviously is infamous for the jaws, but he also had a flamethrower. The flamethrower only appeared once or twice, I believe. But on the rear end, he would fart and release a flame. They barely used it, and I think they removed it by Series 7. But nonetheless, the design of Growler is fantastic. I love the big, mean-spirited, dog look. And I like that on the top of it, he's got a hole through this bit at the top where it's, indicated that he's got a collar that there's a chain that was meant to hold him by, but the chain is broken off and he's just being let loose. I quite like that, attention to detail on Growler. He's got all this personality with the look of his face, the eyes and everything. The mouth being used as part of the design is also great. In terms of the actual mouth itself, he does lose a bit of effectiveness points here, because the way it was designed, I get what they are trying to do, and it works for the most part, but at the same time, there was a lot of robots that could easily just avoid being captured, and I think it's mainly because the design of the jaws were not really appropriate for the arena floor. Like, compare it to, say, Sergeant Bash or Sir Killalot later on, when I'll get onto them, but their claws are designed in such a way that it has sort of like a wedge, where a robot can drive on top of the wedge and then get crushed. Growler didn't have that, and so I think the rounded design didn't really help it there. But nonetheless, you can't help but love Growler. Growler, for me, goes into S tier, because I really do love Growler. Growler, he has a lot of personality to him, and I love the idea that he is always usually paired up with Mr. Psycho, and the way those two look together with Mr. Psycho's claw up there and Growler right next to him, it looks great. It looks great. It definitely fits into the whole, Bullseye and Sykes look they were initially going for with these two. Honestly, Growler's just fantastic. And of all the robots that should have reappeared in the reboot, that one is one that I think could have worked well. And I noticed that Team Robo Challenge, they actually created a robot called Spectre, which looked almost like a modern day Growler. And honestly, if they continue, they would and they use that sort of basis for modern Growler, it would be fantastic. It would truly be fantastic. So up next is the matriarch of mayhem, Matilda. Who doesn't love Matilda? Matilda went through 3 different designs over the years. The first design is the Series 1 to 4 design, which is the one with the chainsaw tail and the slightly smaller lifters, lifting forks, I should say. It's such a great design. Already they went with a fantastic design. I love the color scheme. I love the dinosaur look that they gave to Matilda. With that sort of Stegosaurus sort of horns on the top. And obviously the tusks and the sort of Triceratops crest they had on her, which were all individual thumbprints by the creator of Matilda, which is a fun fact. I love the fact that the tail itself acts quite like a tail, like a real tail. The tail acts like a tail. Jesus Christ, the chainsaw acts like a tail almost, and it adds to the animalistic look to Matilda, which is just beautiful, honestly. Matilda looks stunning. The tusks, the chainsaw, the actual bodywork, absolutely fantastic. I love the Series 1 to 4 look so much. The only issue is the effectiveness of this look died over the years, and Series 1, a lot of robots were small, boxy, they're quite, some of them were made out of wood. The tail could easily just saw straight through. And same with Series 2, there's that moment with Brute, which was completely made out of wood, including the wheels, and she was able to just saw straight through, The chainsaw was able to do that. But as robots improved by Series 3, and it became more combat-centered, her effectiveness sort of died a little bit. Her chainsaw wasn't really being used that much, and her tusks were starting to get a bit more use. By Series 4, I don't think she really used her chainsaw at all, in fact. She mostly used her tusks, and honestly, even when she didn't really use her chainsaw anymore, she used her tusks, and the way she used her tusks were pretty effective. She was able to flip Firestorm with all robots in Series 4. She just charges across the arena, just flips them up, and it was amazing. She obviously flipped over Onslaught as well in the Annihilator, where she got destroyed. But it is quite telling by Series 4 that they needed to redesign her. But nonetheless, Series 1 to 4 Matilda, I absolutely adore her. She's definitely getting an A ranking and a high one at that. The only issue is, obviously, as the years went by, she was becoming less effective. But early days, she was really effective, and her tusks still did a lot of the work. But along comes the Extreme 1, Series 5 to Series 7 Matilda look, which is a massive improvement in terms of effectiveness. She went from being the darling of robots, to being probably the most devastating and brutal house robot. Like, if we were to rank all the damage that the house robots had caused, Series 5 to 7's Matilda, or Extreme 1's to Series 7 Matilda, is probably the most devastating house robot of them all. Like, she just tore robots apart. That flywheel was so devastating. And what's interesting is that her flywheel, if I can recall, isn't very fast. The reason why it caused so much damage was because, for one thing, it actually spun relatively slowly compared to competitor robots. But it was so heavy, and so all it needed to do was one touch, and you could send a robot flying into the air. And, there's obviously the Widow's Revenge fight where she just bashes into Widow's Revenge after Razor just dealt with it, and just the Eternals and the, armor just flies up. There's also the Micro Moot where Sir Killalot held Micro Moot up to a flywheel, and it just tore across the back end completely. It really is an effective robot, and the tusks as well. My god, the tusks are so powerful now. They can flip robots all over. And what's interesting is that the tusks barely got used. Like, with the Series 1 to 4 Matilda, the tusks obviously got a lot more use, but after she got the flywheel, I don't think she really used the tusks all that much. It was mostly the flywheel that did all the action. But nonetheless, her tusks was a far bigger improvement. Like, there's the demonstration in Series 5 where she just throws a brick flying into the air, it comes smashing that back down. They're a vast improvement by a long shot. And one of the things I quite like about the design is, whilst it does kind of get rid of the animalistic look with the chainsaw gone, which acted sort of like a tail, which I loved personally, the design still incorporates some creative choices which I absolutely love. And this in particular is the antennas used to control Matilda, so of course radio frequency and all that. They've done it in sort of like a bow, so it looks like she has like a girly bow on top, and it's so brilliant. Like, honestly, it's one of those things that unless you're paying close attention, you wouldn't notice it, but it's just great. It gives it a very girly look. Honestly, I don't know what else to say. She's just fantastic. Matilda has always been one of my favorite house robots, so of course she's gonna be in the S rank. Very, very gorgeous. Very, very gorgeous. Very, very destructive. Effective as hell. That flywheel is the best house robot weapon. Like, if we were to rank all the weapons the house robots had, that's number one. That's definitely number one. No questions asked. So along comes the reboot. Now, I said earlier that there's 2 reboot designs which look good and 2 that don't look very good. Matilda's in the not very good look. Maybe quite controversial, but I don't really like the Matilda look in the reboot. And one of the reasons why is mainly because of the back end, the spikes and the look of her. The front, the actual head of Matilda looks great. I do like that. I'm not a fan of the spikes, obviously. I think the spikes kind of look daft, but the actual head bit, the tusks up to the eyes and around there, it looks fantastic. She looks great. And in terms of weaponry, her weapons are still fantastic. They are still probably the most destructive out of all the house robots. I think Shunt may be second if we were talking about how destructive and devastating they are against competitors. But Matilda's still number uno when it comes to that. But when it comes to the design, and this is going to be quite controversial, I don't like the spikes on the back of her. I kind of preferred the old look. Even the sort of detail, the shell of Matilda, it just doesn't look great to me, compared to the original, which looked a lot more, not necessarily cleaner, but it looked almost fossilized. This one looks a bit too flaky almost. I don't know, I just don't like that look. I don't really like her big eyes this time, I kind of like the old eyes, but that's nitpicking really. But another thing which I really don't like, and it's mostly because of how wide she is. Matilda's quite thick, but in the sense that her shell almost covers over her wheels, so it almost looks very amateurish. when you see her in the arena, and it just doesn't look very good. I like, really, it's the back end of Matilda which doesn't look good. Like, if you saw Matilda without armor, which, my god, this sounds all wrong, but if you saw Matilda without armor, you know, you got this really great looking chassis, and like, if you put like the old shell on it, it would look beautiful. But then you put this new shell on it, it just doesn't look right. Like, it really, if you have a side-by-side comparison between the two, you can still recognize it's Matilda, but you're gonna think that the other one looks a lot more appealing, whereas this one just doesn't. And it's really, what ruins it is the spikes. The spikes are just overdone. They don't look very good. I don't like them. I get that they're trying to do a more animalistic look, which is great, but the spikes don't look great. I'm glad they're using fiberglass again, like they did with the original Matilda. That's kind of cool. But yeah, just, and even like the way the shell looks, it just looks like it's like overlapping the wheels. It looks like it's too wide for its own good. I also absolutely detest what they did in Series 10 with the white spikes. Something I forgot to mention with Dead Metal is that the Matilda and Dead Metal had a bit of a like repaint, where Dead Metal had like white tips on his spikes, which actually looked quite good for Dead Metal. But with Matilda, the white spikes just looked awful. They looked awful. I actually prefer the silver spikes from Series 8 and 9. But to make up for what is quite a lackluster design, her effectiveness is brilliant. Like, she is really effective. It's a shame that she was not really used that much, because unfortunately the reboot decided that Shunt and Sir Killalot were the only house robots in the show, and so Dead Metal and Matilda kind of got shelved quite a bit, especially towards Series 10 where they barely appeared. But even then, like, Matilda was still capable of causing a lot of damage and all sorts of horrible, you know, mangled machinations. You know, she threw Nuts out the arena by just backing into him, and same with Thor, she flipped him out of the arena. The Tusks are a lot more powerful this time, and, you know, greatly so. And actually, that's another thing we're supposed to talk about the design. I don't like the fact the head moves as well with the Tusks. It looks kind of off-putting, and it's mainly because you can see like the underneath of the shell, which just kind of ruins the illusion. I kind of preferred the old Tusks, but to its credit, the Tusks are very powerful in this. Very powerful indeed. Yeah, like, the thing about Matilda's design is it's not dreadful. That's the thing. I don't want to say it's completely awful, and I know I'm going on about it, but it's one of those designs where if they had a bit more time to work it out a bit, maybe, you know, add a bit of the classic spice to it, it would have been far better. But for what we got, I am a little bit disappointed. That said, in terms of effectiveness, the flywheel was devastating, could tear robots apart still. It caused Big Nipper to explode. It, you know, threw robots out of the arena, and it was, and the Tusks are just brilliant in this. But like I said, the shell sort of overlapped, and she even had like trouble getting out of the pit at one point. Like, well, even though the pit was up, you know, she had trouble getting out, you know, and it's kind of a problem with the shell, really. It's really just the design, and this is probably the first, like, effective but poor design. And it's only just in there because, like I said, this is a very subjective opinion. I do still really love Matilda, and Matilda's fantastic, but, like I said, the design could have done with a few minor modifications, and not whitening of the spikes, because the white spikes look dreadful on Matilda. Next up is Mr. Psycho. Mr. Psycho. You know, it's funny, when I went to see Series 6 being filmed, I remember they filmed the Series Mr. Psycho and Growler moment where they enter the arena and they're showing off the new house robots to everyone. And I think they did it like multiple times during the filming session. So they did it once and they did it again and they did it again. It's quite funny. Mr. Psycho. I love the look of Mr. Psycho. Like, something I said with Cassius Chrome is that the later house robots really did have a brilliant, like, characteristic look to them. You know, they were almost like cartoons brought to life, and I love Mr. Psycho's look. I love how the claw and the hammer, it looks so brilliant. You know, it's so good that the live events, obviously, they have their own house robot, which is basically just a, you know, miniature, you know, version of Mr. Psycho. Or actually, it might have been the same size, I don't remember. But, like, it's like Mr. Psycho just looks great. Mr. Psycho is a beautiful house robot. I love him so much. However, great design aside, in terms of effectiveness, he was still quite effective, but he wasn't very damaging. And that's something that a lot of people pointed out. Like his hammer, which looks all this massive, devastating hammer, it looks brilliant. He smashes it down, and all it does is make the same thudding sound over and over again, but the robot just doesn't even have a scratch on it. To make matters worse, even though it's such a well-made and beautiful design, the design had a bit of a flaw. So the hammer, because it's got I believe 3 different points to the hammer, and it swings down and up again. If it swung down, it sometimes had trouble getting back up again. So Mr. Psycho would be going around with his arm out with the hammer out sometimes, and then he'd have to slowly foot it back down, which it didn't look that great, all things considered. Which kind of sucked. But nonetheless, the claw did a lot of the work, and the claw looked so gorgeous. Like the way he picked them up. Mind you, again, this is another part of the design flaw, physical design flaw. The claw was made in a way that it is kind of hard to pick up robots. Like I said with Growler earlier, the reason why Sir Killalot and Sergeant Bash were able to pick up robots with their claws was because it was created sort of like a wedge. So, the bottom of the claw was like a wedge that could go across the arena, while the top bit basically grabbed onto it and they could lift it up like that. This one, yeah, Mr. Psycho has a great claw, but it was almost impossible for him to pick up robots, which is a shame. I am debating on this because I want to put him in A rank, but at the same time, his effectiveness was kind of nullified by, unfortunately, some design flaws. Even though his design is beautiful and absolutely fantastic, so creative, so characteristic. I don't know. I might put him in the great design, but ineffective. But he's going to be in the top end because he is close to an A rank. But just because of those issues regarding Mr. Psycho, he's going to have to go there. So next up is a very unique house robot. This is Refbot. Refbot had 2 variations over the years. You had the Series 4 house variation, and you had the Series 5 to 7 variation, because of course he appeared in Series 4. The Series 4 version is the first one up, and I love the look of Refbot. Refbot always had a really cool design. It's amazing that Refbot never lost his head or got completely destroyed in any of the fights. But Refbot's Series 4 design is gorgeous. It truly is gorgeous. I love the actual referee top that he has, for the body. And, of course, the head looks great. It's so well made. It's so great. It reminds me of Short Circuit in a way, Is he called Johnny 5? I believe the robot from Short Circuit. That's what Refbot reminds me of. His design looks like that almost. I love the design. It's so characteristic and all that. Now, in terms of effectiveness, unlike the other house robots that are there to destroy and maim, Refbot in Series 4 was meant to help free robots and put them out. The issue was, Series 4 Refbot didn't really do a whole lot. There's barely anything that happens with Refbot in Series 4. The most he does is, extinguish the flames, and even then it's a really pitiful, sort of, just really pitiful. And even then, he didn't really free many robots. He just sort of, dawdled about in the background. He'd be spinning around with his head, the wrong way round, Yeah, Refbot in Series 4 wasn't very effective, which is a shame because his design is great. Just going to put him in great design, but ineffective. However, Refbot got an upgrade in Series 5, or Extreme 1, and this upgrade elevates his effectiveness massively. And it's a simple upgrade, and that is a counter. So, obviously, he can still extinguish the flames if he wanted to. He can still run about with his, bladed, ramming blade front, which looks great, by the way. And he can still free robots if he wanted to. But he has a counter now. And this counter worked in 2 different ways. So, if a robot was immobilized, he could sit there and actually count them down, which gave you a visual indicator of like when the robot was out and done for. Obviously, there's always been that tricky rule regarding the there's that tricky like rule regarding like whether it's immobilized if it's only moving on one wheel and or not, because robots are so inconsistent in that way. I believe personally, if you're not moving on one wheel, you're out. But Refbot, sometimes there was that issue, but he always gave that visual indicator. And it was great to see him like count down, and everyone would always count down alongside him, 10, 9, 8, 9, 10, blah, 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 in that order. But he also had like a red card, yellow card system. So the house robots, if they interfered too much, you'd give them like a red card or a yellow card, and they would like either be taken out of the battle for once, or they would still be around, but with a warning. Obviously, they barely really used that. I think they only really used it in Extreme 1 and Extreme 2. In Extreme 1, they did it to demonstrate it basically with the dead metal attacking Behemoth. And in Extreme 2, it was because Sergeant Bash and Refbot decided to fight each other because Mute was boring everyone, The battle between Mute and I think Mr. Nasty, was it? It was absolutely boring, so they decided to kill each other instead. House robot infighting, far more entertaining. And so Refbot, the counter was great. But also, like, at the beginning of the fights, when it's 3, 2, 1, activate, and you just see Refbot sitting there, and the lights flash, and it's green to go, and he backs away, and the robots kill each other. It's just so iconic. Like, Refbot, had a massive upgrade. I don't think he's S tier, personally. I don't like him that much, but he's still up there. Up next is a very unique house robot. Now, when I was selecting the house robots, I did think about whether or not to put Dozer and Shove on here. Dozer and Shove were two behind-the-scenes house robots that were there to clean up the wreckage afterwards. But because you never really saw them on screen, I didn't really want to put them on there. And plus, they're basically shunts, but, without an axe. Although they do have a hammer on the back, so, yeah. But there is a house robot which did appear on screen. And it's a house robot that not a lot of people ever speak about or talk about, and that is the Sentinel. Take a nice drink there. The Sentinel. The Sentinel is basically a digger that has been designed in such a way that it can like knock robots about with its spiked hammer like thing. And it's the only house robot, and it's funnily enough, it's the largest house robot in Robot Wars history. But it's the only house robot that has actually got a driver inside the arena itself. So there's a guy actually controlling it, like you would with a normal excavator. I don't know what else to say. He was only really there for the Gauntlet battles. Oh, not even battles, just Gauntlet in Series 2, and then he was only brought in like halfway through the series, in fact. And then after that, he appeared, I think, in the semi-finals and grand final in the arena, off to the side. And if a robot got near him, he'd like come down and help the house robots in the PPZ. As you can see, I'm struggling to talk much about the Sentinel because he was such a short-lived house robot and very useless. He was more of a hazard. Like, I think the only time he ever did, like, there were some moments of usefulness, I guess. Like, he pushed some robots into the pit, but he's more of a hazard than a house robot, and his design is just a bunch of, like, metal plates stuck onto a mini excavator. That is it. Yeah, honestly, I think Sentinel goes in F tier, because Sentinel is just not very interesting at all. Well, next up is Sergeant Bash. Now, poor old Sergeant Bash, he didn't get into the reboot, which is a real shame. Especially because he was in the very beginning of Robot Wars. And Robot Wars gave Sergeant Bash 3 different designs. The first design was the Series 1 and 2 design, and I'll be honest, I do not like the design at all. The design looks like a bunch of like scrappy metal plates that have just been hastily put together. And it doesn't really look good. Like, the best part about this version of Sergeant Bash is the wheel hub. I quite like the wheel hub on the side. And, the spike at the front looks kind of cool. But at the same time, it just looks kind of weird. The flamethrower obviously is iconic. The saw blade on the back didn't really do anything. It broke off on several fights, and even then it just mostly scratched robots. Like, Elvis of all robots was targeted by this saw blade, and what it did was just scratch the paintwork. You know, it wasn't very good. Like, if I'm honest, I'm not really a fan of this version of Sergeant Bash. It looks very hastily put together. It doesn't look very good. He was barely that effective either. But he's not dreadful, I guess. You know, I like the wheel hub, and I like the look of the spike at the front, even though it doesn't really make sense in the long run. He's going in D tier. Luckily, Sergeant Bash alongside Dead Metal had like a massive overhaul in their design, and Sir Killalot for that matter. Ooh, my throat is getting all rusty now. Now then, back to our regular scheduled program. As you can tell, these are live. So, Sergeant Bash in Series 3, from an outsider perspective, that you wouldn't tell there's a difference between this one and the Sergeant Bash that appeared in Series 4 onwards. Series 4 onwards is different to the Sergeant Bash that appears in Series 3. And for one thing, he was a lot more lighter coloured in Series 3. But also, he had a different front end. So if you look very closely, he actually had like a more rounded claw. So obviously they got rid of the saw blade and they fixed up the design, so it's a lot more cleaner, more slimmer, although he's a bit chunky in Series 3. And the claw was one of those firefighter, jaws of life that they put on the front of Sergeant Bash. Now, admittedly, the claw did quite a good job. It was able to grab onto robots and just, crush them down and what have you. And the flamethrower, obviously, it's just iconic. It torched Dietor several times. What else is there to say? There's not really much to say, really. I think Series 3 was a step forward. I will say this, the claw wasn't that great. They were still trying so hard to keep that like front spike thing, so they made the claw look like that. Obviously, what I'm trying to lead into is the fact that Sergeant Bash had a massive overhaul for Series 4 onwards, with the Sergeant Bash we all know and love, the one with that beautiful looking claw on the front. Like, it's amazing what one change can do to a robot. So, for one thing, Sergeant Bash in Series 4 onwards had a much more slimmer design to the Series 3 Sergeant Bash. And the claw, it was just phenomenal. Like, the claw... Remember I said, like, the claw sort of acts like a wedge sometimes? Well, this definitely does. Like, it goes across the ground, the bottom bit, it's pretty much straight, but the top bit comes down and it just crushes down on robots, and you just see this claw crush down on robots. Like, Series 3 did a good job, but it only really did once or twice. But Series 4 onwards, he just crushed all sorts of robots. And the flamethrower itself, they've also adjusted it slightly, so now it's a bit more like slimmer, but it's also a bit more stylistic in a way that it looks so much cleaner and much better. Like, this is the definitive Sergeant Bash design. Like, this is such a gorgeous design. I love the coat of green they gave him from this point onwards. There's a lot more of a darker green, but it's still a gorgeous looking green. This is the best Sergeant Bash by a long shot. I don't know where to put him. I want to put him in A, but I'm going to put him in A because whilst I do like Sergeant Bash, he isn't perfect. He was still pretty, unreliable on occasions. But nonetheless, that claw, that pushing power as well, really good. And the paintwork, gorgeous. So, on to Sir Killalot, the daddy of all house robots. Technically, it should be Shunt first, but I wanted to keep Shunt last, because I want to talk about Sir Killalot first. Sir Killalot has had 4 different designs. In Series 2, his debut, he had a very lowered back, sort of like slim look. His lance wasn't a drill, it was like a proper spiked lance. And his claw was this small firefighter claw. Now, from the get-go, you get what you're given here. He looks like a knight. He looks like, he calls himself Sir Killalot. he looks great. He looks great. Well, I say he looks great. He almost looks great. For one thing, the eyes weren't LED just yet. I think they might have had a few issues then and there, because it does look like they tried putting LEDs in, but then they ran out of time or something. So, there's an excuse there. It is kind of cursed seeing the lance as well. The lance just kind of looks kind of weird. It was mostly there to chuck robots over, if anything. Still a pretty cool look. The claw, I don't think it really did much other than stab a few tracks in here and there. And I'm not really a fan of the sloped back look for Sir Killalot in Series 2. But at the same time, this is a good start, if that makes sense. This is a good start. He was effective. He was definitely effective in Series 2. He was definitely a robot you did not want to go near. Although, if I'm perfectly honest, I think Shunt was still like the big bad at the time. So Sir Killalot was definitely like the second placer. But nonetheless, he's going to go in the effective but poor design. I'm not really a fan of the sloped back look. The LED light's not working, kind of, feels a bit too obvious. And of course, the small claw, not very good. But Series 3 comes along and they gave Sir Killalot a bit of an overhaul in his design. They made his back a lot more beefier, a lot more like big and bricked up, if that makes sense. His claw is still the same claw. It's still that small firefighter jaw of life claw. But his lance has now become like a drill lance. And this is, of course, the iconic lance look. It's getting there. It's getting there. Once again, this is Sir Killalot slowly evolving. They gave him the LED lights now. The eyes flashing red look beautiful. Sir Killalot in Series 3 just looks great. He looks great. He is effective still, and well, even more so now. Like now, he's becoming a big threat you don't want to mess with. Like he'll pick you up with the lance, and he'll twirl you around now because he's got that drill. And the claw was still kind of ineffective. It's too small. It's too nippy. It's not really there, but he's getting there. That's the thing. This Sir Killalot is getting there. And now to the best of the Sir Killalot designs, the Series 4 to 7 design. Wow. It's amazing what a few little changes here and there can do to a robot. You can go from looking pretty good looking, somewhat effective, to then just being an almighty god of a robot. And just the individual little designs they did. So to add on to the like knightly look that he has, they gave him these shoulder armor plates, which have like little spikes on them. It looks beautiful. The claw. I was saying this with Sergeant Bash, but the claw is so much better now. Now these claws, I believe, are slightly modified claws from the Jaws of Life. These aren't like the ones that firefighters used beforehand. These are much more bigger. And the way they've been designed is they're quite long if you look at them. They're quite long and they got like flat plates underneath. So you can lower the claw down, he opens it up and he can just scoop in, grab a robot like that. It looks fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And that drill is still absolutely devastating. I'm thinking of Series 6 when Wasp just got torn to pieces just by that drill. Sir Killalot, and I love the little, like, it's just like Matilda with the sort of Stegosaurus, plates on the back. I love that. I love the meshy, like, compacted, big, beefy look of the actual, like, cage-like bodywork of Sir Killalot. This Sir Killalot is just fantastic in every sense of the word. Boy, I hope they don't ruin it next time if they're going to reboot it. Spoiler alert. Oh boy. Series 8 to 10 Sir Killalot. Well, I remember back when the reboot was announced. I remember everyone's getting excited for it because of course it was coming out. I remember the first few pictures on the pilot. People saw the arena. The arena looked like shit. That was a bit of disappointment. But hey, Dead Metal looks great. Dead Metal looks gorgeous. Then we started seeing pictures from like the pits and all that. And like, holy shit, here's Shunt. Shunt looks pretty much the same. He looks great. Matilda looks pretty good. It looks a little bit beefier, but it looks pretty good nonetheless. And then there was Sir Killalot. for ages, people was wondering, what's Sir Killalot like? What's the Sir Killalot like? The people who didn't see it filmed. And then the pictures surfaced, and my God, was there like a collective sigh over the reboot Sir Killalot? Like, I remember the most jokes made about it was the fact that it looked just like a Bionicle. In particular, it looks just like Torgali from the what was it, the Phantonics era of Bionicle, in 2008. Like, I'm not even kidding. If you like have a picture of like Torgali, like mask, and Sir Killalot from the reboot, they're pretty much the same. My God, how do you fuck up a design this badly? Like, that's all I'm going to say right now. How do you fuck up a design this badly? Like, even like when you see other house robots, the old house robot poachers and the new ones, when you see them trying to be all intimidating and all that, when you look at the old house robot pictures, Sir Killalot out in front, he looks intimidating. He looks like a big boss. He looks fantastic and, mean-spirited. Then you look at the reboot one, he just looks like a lame duck. He really does. He does not look good. He looks he looks like Bob, the discount Sir Killalot. They basically got rid of the whole knightly look for Sir Killalot and just made him into like a space marine, basically. And it doesn't look good. It looks dreadful. The mask is absolutely awful. The eyes look dreadful. It just doesn't look like Sir Killalot. Like, if you were to show someone from the far future, from the past, a picture of the 2016 Sir Killalot, and you only you only showed them the head, they'd probably think that this was some Chinese ripoff. It looks fucking awful. It looks absolutely awful. Like, the armor plates on the arms look dreadful. There's literal gaps that are so massive that you can see straight through Sir Killalot. And they brought back this stupid curved back look, which doesn't look good at all. Like, why they couldn't just cage it up like they did with the original? Like, give that rib cage sort of look. That looked pretty decent. Might have given it a few extra points, but no, they decided, let's just see straight through the fucking robot. Oh, but there's two giant pistons, so you know that it's a big robot. Even weaponry-wise, the lance is now no longer a claw again, and no longer a drill, I meant. But literally just a lance. And then you got the claw. The claw, they managed to fuck that up as well. They managed to literally fuck up the claw by making it unable to grab most robots. Like, there's a reason why the claw was designed a specific way in Series 4 onwards. Because it was designed to scoop in on the ground, slide under, grab, lift up, throw, do whatever. They made it round, so it's even like some episodes, some battles where he will literally get his claw like jabbed into the ground as he's struggling to pick it up, and he lifts himself almost. Like, what? The worst part is there are behind the scene photos of them like coming up with the designs for the new house robots. When Matilda and Shunt and Dead Metal, they all had like a very specific idea of what they wanted to do. And with Sir Killalot, they even had the old helmet there. They knew exactly what Sir Killalot looked like. They knew exactly how he was built and functioned. And they did that to him. They did that to Sir Killalot. Like, imagine if you were, imagine someone who was a big fan of Sir Killalot and you showed, like I said, go into the past and you were to show them a picture of this. My God. I will say this, though. They brought back the chest plate. I mean, it's covered up almost, but they brought that back. That's kind of cool. The front wedge looks decent. The tracks look great. He's still, I guess, somewhat intimidating. They even got rid of the LED lights. Like, they even got rid of the LED red eyes. Like, oh my God. Like, what the fuck were they thinking? Like, I know the reboot wasn't very good. I know that, they were obsessed with trying to oversimplify things. Like, hence the arena looking like crap. Hence the logo being somewhat overcomplicated when it really didn't need to be. Hence the no battle music. Reboot Sir Killalot almost feels like a personification of the reboot. You know, it's so stubborn that it doesn't want to listen to any criticism. It doesn't want to listen to anything wrong. And, you know, by the time they decide, okay, maybe you should do a little bit of fixes, it's too late. The viewer base has just disappeared because they have just witnessed what is two very mediocre series. Series 9 in particular being absolutely awful. And too little, too late. You've already fucked up. And, So there's a reason why I wanted Shunt last, is because I'm going to speak a lot more positively about Shunt than I will Reboot Sir Killalot, and I don't want to end on a sour note, but that is just dreadful. There is nothing redeeming about this design, other than the tracks, other than, like, the front wedge, maybe. But how effective was he? He was somewhat effective. I will say, he was somewhat effective. He was able to occasionally pick up robots and chuck them about. He was able to do that. So, where the fuck am I going to rank him? Well, I'm going to put him in effective but poor design. Because at least he was able to do stuff. At least he was able to charge across the arena. At least he was still able to, you know, be a boss in somewhat of a sense. He was, you know, I said it already, the reboot loved to just use Sir Killalot and Shunt all the time. They were like the only two house robots, according to the reboot. Mainly because they were good at deflecting spinners, and that's kind of good. And like I said, the track design and the front wedge looks great. It's just, when you go a little bit up, and you see the rest of it, it looks dreadful. Absolutely piss poor. Like, honestly, if anyone created that design, I hope they fucking hang their heads in shame. Like, that is absolutely abysmal. So, on to Shunt. So after that big rant about how dreadful Reboot Sir Killalot was, we're on to the final house robot. And the reason why I wanted Shunt last is because I wanted to end on a positive note. And Shunt, I'm going to say this right now, is my favourite house robot. However, Series 1 Shunt isn't that great. In terms of effectiveness, Series 1 Shunt it was the big bad of the house robots at the time. Because, of course, Sir Killalot wasn't made then. But its axe, it just didn't do anything. The design is interesting because the design keeps consistent throughout the whole years, but Series 1 Shunt is somewhat unique in the sense that it has like a little cut in the scoop so the yak can slowly come down and go ting. And he has like a spike on the like plow. Yeah, the design's not that great. I don't really know what to say. Like, Series 1 Shunt is kind of weird to look at. It's weird to look at, and it's weird to think about. It wasn't, like, as much as I fucking hate the Sir Killalot from the reboot, at least it was effective. At least it was somewhat effective. However, and this is a big however, Shunt got an upgrade in Series 2, and a massive one at that. They realised, like, the axe was shit, so they decided to replace it with a much more tougher axe. It's sort of like a pickaxe. And they got rid of that horrible spike on this plow, and they made the plow look good. The scoop is now functional, it can go up and down. They got rid of that horrible little cut in the top. He looks gorgeous in Series 2. Like, Series 2 Shunt is interesting because he's got like these like two eyes on the scoop. I mean, they're two holes, but they look almost like eyes. Give it a bit of personality. I love the look of Series 2 Shunt. Series 2 Shunt is a step up massively. I think they even like made him a bit more like chrome in color, because Series 1 Shunt looked a bit diluted in color. It was very brownish, whereas this one is a bit more chrome. And I love the way the axe looks now. The axe is a lot more effective. So it was to hammer down, cause holes in all sorts of robots, like Panic Attack, for example. Famous moment where he just leaves all these hole prints on Panic Attack. It's amazing. Like, Series 2 Shunt is a massive step up. A massive step up. But it's not getting there just yet. Like, I'm going to put him right up. I'm going to put him before Sergeant Bash. Now we got the best Shunt. What is, in my opinion, the best Shunt? Shunt Series 3 onwards is a masterclass of a house robot. One of the things I quite like is that they kind of like created all these like little like all the dents and cuts on his plow and scoop are sort of like kept in. And it gives him this really rusty sort of industrial look, which kind of fits into the like motif of this house robot, this characterization in a way. The design, the coloring looks beautiful. The diamond edge axe, phenomenal. The way it's able to slam down onto a robot and just create a massive hole in it. And it gets stuck in there for a few moments as it lifts it back up, and and as it lifts the robot up and the robot jolts up, it's the scoop able to move up and down and flip a robot over if it wanted to. The bulldozing plow, he was in so many memorable moments. Like obviously the most memorable of all is probably the Hypnodisc Pussycat fight, where Shunt just slams the axe down and just breaks Hypnodisc's blade just like that. And Hypnodisc doesn't do anything to Shunt. Shunt's disc plow survives. I'm trying to think. Like, I think the only time Hypnodisc really damages Shunt is in Series 6, and in Series 7, Supernova damages Shunt, but that's about it. And it just causes a cut. That's all. Shunt still pushes on through and just bashes all the robots out of the way. It's gorgeous robot, and everything about this Shunt absolutely amazing. And now onto the Reboot Shunt. Now, all the Reboot house robots had their own fair share of issues. Some of them had much more bigger issues than others. In Dead Metal's case, it was a beautiful robot, but the design wasn't great. The design was great, but it wasn't very effective. Matilda, it was extremely effective, but the design was flawed. And then Sir Killalot, just burn it. Just find out where warehouse it's in and just destroy it. Dismantle it into a million pieces and just create a new one. Just create a new one, even though there's no show now. Just do it. That's your punishment. But Shunt in the Reboot is probably the most used house robot for very good reason. It was the most effective. Its design is still top notch, and it was just fantastic. Shunt and Dead Metal's designs more or less didn't change from the years. There were obviously the odd changes, It's much more cleaner, which I'm not a fan of the cleaner look. I prefer the more gritty, grungy sort of look. But nonetheless, Shunt still kicks ass. And I was a little bit worried about the axe, because I thought the axe being titanium, it wasn't going to be as good as the old axe. And, by Series 7, the axe was starting to lose its, effectiveness. But it was still able to create holes. It was still able to just hammer through robots. Like, there's that one battle where Draven just gets the axe straight through its entire body. And he smashed off a piece from Carbide as well on the top when he smashes the axe down. Like, he's in a spinner killer. Like, Carbide, most powerful spinner in Robot's history, couldn't do anything to Shunt. Like, Shunt was that beastly. Shunt was a god in this reboot. Like, he was really good. Like, there's a reason why him and Sir Killalot was in the arena together, because they were the only ones that could deal with the modern day robots. Even though Sir Killalot's design and effectiveness wasn't brilliant, Shunt made up for that and just was the one responsible for just causing all sorts of like terror. Shunt was brutal. Shunt is gorgeous. Shunt is absolutely fantastic. And it's quite funny because Shunt, I believe, was also noted for being the most aggressive of all the house robots, because other house robots at least kept their selves at bay, but Shunt just always charged in and just smashed them to pieces. Like, even on like Rogue House Robot, Shunt was always the one that charged in, just hammered away. Honest to God, Shunt really worked. And I love that they still sort of kept that sort of like builder's, like industrial machine look to it. Like, even though it's a lot more cleaner, it's still got that sort of industrial look, which looks fantastic. Like, Reboot Shunt is wonderful. And whilst I want to put him there, I'm actually going to put him just below Matilda, just because I love Matilda more, subjectively speaking. But there's a reason why Reboot Shunt was a beast among house robots. You know, it's funny because he used to get flipped over all the time, Shunt, and yet he only got flipped over once, whereas Dead Metal just got flipped over multiple times, which seems abnormal, almost parallel. Yeah, Shunt. There's a reason why I wanted to end on Shunt, because Shunt is just the best. Shunt really is like the best well-rounded house robot. Like, there's nothing else to say. And I love how Shunt has improved over the years. Like, from Series 1, he wasn't that great. But, you know, for the time, he might have been pretty good. But then came Series 2, and he improves massively. And in Series 3, gorgeous, brilliant, fantastic, wonderful. And Reboot, he still kicks ass. He's still wonderful, still the best. So that is it for today. That is my ranking of the house robots and their designs, basically, and how effective they are. Shunt is number uno for sure, but Matilda definitely is second place. Like, Matilda's great. Like, I do feel kind of bad putting the Reboot one like on the effective but poor design, because I do really like the Reboot Matilda, but it's just the design. The design just needed a few more tweaks. Sir Killalot in the classic era was wonderful. Reboot Sir Killalot can burning a fire. Sergeant Bash, of course, is a classic, wonderful in all senses of the word. Dead Metal is pretty useless, but when he creates sparks, he's wonderful. And of course, in the classic era, he was very beautiful and very sleek and cool. Growler, I love the dog. Who doesn't love Growler? Mr. Psycho, I love the design. It's a fantastic design, but obviously, you know, the claw and the hammer, it wasn't that effective. Refbot by Series 5, he was wonderful. You know, he's actually pretty effective. I can see why he would not be introduced in the reboot, but at the same time, it would have been great to have him there, because he would have been there to literally count down robots, and it would have been obvious, oh, that robot's out, done and dusted, instead of having like Foxic go through to round 2 despite doing nothing and being dead. And then you have the Sentinel. The Sentinel, shortest-lived house robot. More of a hazard than a house robot. I really don't care about the Sentinel. Oh, and there's also Cassius Chrome. I forgot about Cassius Chrome. How could I forget about Cassius Chrome? Jesus. He's one of the most hated house robots, most hated robots in general. But I will give it credit that the design is wonderful. The design is so cartoony, so characteristic. It's so wonderful in every sense of the word. Honestly, if they gave him a bit more power, a bit more like oomph to him, Cassius Chrome probably would have been good. So yeah, overall, Shunt dominates. Shunt is the best. Matilda, also very, very good. I do feel bad about the reboot Matilda, but at the same time, I've got to go with my gut. Sir Killalot, yeah. You can have a look here. I might even link the tier list I've done it on. I hope you enjoyed this tier list ranking, and who knows, because I have had this idea of going through all the Robot Wars competitors with the same sort of like style tier list, where I go through like whether or not they're great or not, where in effectiveness and design and all that. You know, maybe starting with Series 1, because luckily there's only like 30 odd competitors there. And then moving all the way to Series 10. Who knows, that might be an idea for the future. Could work, might not work. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe you have a different opinion, you probably do. Maybe you hate my guts, maybe you don't. And I'll see you next time.